Welcome to the course Business Analytics and Text Mining Modeling using Python. So, in previous few lectures we have been discussing about data structures. In the previous lecture and previous few lectures we talked about tuples, list, and we started a bit on dicts. So, let us go through quickly what we have understood in previous lecture, and then we will pick up from the point where we stopped in the previous lecture. So, we talked about tuples. So, I will just skip this part and move to the next one. So, we talked about tuples and how they are created, how they can be worked with, how they can be manipulated, and methods and other things. So, all these things we have talked about in the previous lecture. Then we talked about list, and we also talked about what list is about, how it is defined, how to work with list, how to modify, what operations can be used. So, all these aspects we have talked about in the previous lectures. Let us move forward from here. Slicing also we talked about in the context of list. So, this particular aspect also we covered in the previous lecture. Negative index for slicing also we talked about in the previous lecture. So, I will just skip through this part because we will be talking about a new data structure now. We talked about some useful sequence functions as well. We talked about zip, unzipping, reversed, and I think we were discussing dict in the last part of our previous lecture. So, let us pick up from there. So, we talked about dict, one of the most important built-in data structure in Python, and also called hash map or associative array. So, this is a flexible sized mutable collection of key value pairs. So, this is a more of a collection, unordered kind of collection where we have key value pairs, and with the help of key we can access values, and the key are supposed to be unique in nature, and typically key are supposed to be immutable in a sense generally, but overall the collection is mutable, but the key part of it is expected to be, and generally it is immutable. So, keys and values both are Python objects. So, this is typically dicts are created with a comma separated collection of key value pairs. So, these key and value pairs they are separated by colon, and the whole key value pairs, multiple key value pairs that we might have in the collection, they are separated using comma, and then we use curly braces to actually indicate this data structure that it is a dict type. So, let us start with this. So, here as you can see in the first example that we have, we are initializing a dict object. Here you can see we are just using the open curly braces just to define a empty dict here. So, let us run this, and you would see in the output just the curly braces are depicted there. Then once this is done, let us move to another example. So, here you can see we are initializing dict with the full form, where you can see a first key value pair that we have. We have the key that is in the string form, that is a string object in single quotes S, and then colon, and then ohm, that is the value. So, the value is in the string form, and the key is also in the string form. And then the second key value pair, second element of this dict object that we have is again key value pair. So, key is again in the string form I, and then colon separating the key with the value, that is value is the list object, in the brackets we have 1 2 3. So, let us run this, and you can see in the output within the curly braces we have these key value pairs as elements of this particular list. Now, in terms of accessing dict elements, we can use brackets operator. So, just like we have been using other data structures like tuples or a list. Similarly, this brackets operator can also be used to access elements of a dict. So, here D1 we have already initialized. So, you can see D1 and we are using brackets, and there you can see the differences. Now, in the tuples and list we were using the indices to access a particular element. Here if you see that we are using the key actually to access a particular element. So, that is why when I say it is kind of unordered, because we are accessing a particular key value pair using a key. So, therefore, irrespective of the order we would be able to access it. So, therefore, order is not that important in this particular data structure. And if you look at tuples and list, it is with the help of a particular index that we access those elements. So, therefore, those elements, the order is very much there in the way they are created and then the way they are accessed. So, this is one difference. So, here let us run this D1, and within the brackets we are indicating the key, that is I, and if I run this, you can see in the output I get the value, that is value part of key value pair, that is this list or with the elements of 1, 2, 3. Now, similarly, let us do another example. This time we will use the another key, that is S, and let us run this. Again we can see we can access the value part, that is ohm string here. Now, adding elements in a dict, how that can be performed. So, here for adding any element we can again use the brackets operator here, and we will have to specify the key here. So, you can see D1 and we are using a new key here in the single quotes F. So, this is a string object based key, and then we are assigning the other part of the element here, that is a list value based on list. So, in the brackets we have 1.2, 2.3, 4.5. So, this is actually all the all the elements of this particular object, that is list, or floating point number. So, that is why we have also given the key as F. So, let us execute this particular example. So, let us run this part. So, you can see in the output now we have 3 elements. So, earlier we had 2 elements, key value pairs with S and I, S for string, I for all the all the elements in the value part being the integer numbers, and then the third which we have added with the key F, that is we are indicating that all the elements in that value part or floating point number. So, this is one way to add elements in a dict. Now, let us run few more examples. So, we are adding few more elements here. For example, D1 and the key is dummy string object, and then the value is also string, that is XYZ. Then we are adding another element where we are mentioning D1 and the key is 9. So, this time the key is integer value, and then we have the value part of this thing is again a string. So, let us run this, and in the output you can see 2 additional elements dummy and value XYZ and 9 value a value have been added. So, in this fashion we can add elements into a list, into a dict. And now let us talk about modifying elements of a dict. So, here you can see this, that in this example what we are doing is the last element that we added D1 9 with the key 9, and now we are changing a value to the value here, and you would see that if we run this part, and you can see that simply in the dict the last element 9 and the value part of it has been changed. So, in this fashion, using simply the assignment operator we would be able to do in place replacement of the value part of it. So, this can be easily done in this fashion. So, we can easily modify elements of a dict. Now, sometimes there might be situations sometimes where we would be required to check whether a dict contains a key. So, for this we can use these two keywords in and not in. We can use in this fashion, for example, whether this f key is present in the dict object, that is D1. So, if I run this, I will get true because we know that this is present part of D1. Similarly, we can use the other keyword, that is not in. So, the example that I am using here is I, this is the key not in D1, but we know that this is part of that. So, we will get again the answer as false. So, we will run this and you can see. Now, let us move to the next part, that is removing elements in a dict. So, here we have two options here, and one is del keyword and then other one is the pop method that we have. So, we can either use del keyword to delete a particular element in a dict. So, we will have to just type del and then we will have to indicate the element. So, here just like we access element using the key part, here we will have to indicate the element with the key part. So, D1 and within the brackets we will have to type the key, that is 9 in this case that we want to delete. So, if I run this, you would see that particular element is out of this particular dict. So, you can see we have S, I, F and dummy, and after that the last element which was 9, that is missing here. Another way to remove the element is by using pop method. So, in the next example what we are doing here is that we are using pop method. So, with this object D1 that we have created, so D1 dot pop and dummy is the key that we are passing as an argument, and so we would like to delete this element, this key value pair where key is dummy. So, we are also recording the return value here in the ret1, and if I run this, you can see the D1 now is only 3 elements are remaining, S, I and F, and dummy is also gone. If I look at the the return value, so you can see ret1. So, the value that was part of the key value pair that is with the key dummy. So, the value is recorded in ret1 x, y, z. So, in this fashion we can these are two ways typically which are used to remove an element in a particular dict object. Now, we have two methods called keys and values methods. So, sometimes you would like to know the keys which are part of a particular dict object or values which are part of a particular dict object. To obtain those results we can use these two methods, keys and values method. So, let us run this D1 dot keys and with the parentheses. So, we will call this function, and in the output you can see all the keys that are part of this D1 object, D1 dict object, they can be seen here S, I and F. Similarly, because this is in this form, so we can use the list. So, in the output, if as you can see, if we use the list for D1 dot keys, then in the output we can get a list with the key part of the elements only. So, SIF here you can see. Similarly, we can use the values method for this object, dict object. So, D1 dot values, if we run this again, we will get the output. Here you can see dict values, and you can see the output contains only the values part of the dict object. So, if we just again we want to have just output as the values, then we can again use the list function here. So, list D1 dot values, if we run this, and you would see the output just contains the values part. Now, let us move on to the next part where sometimes we might be required to merge two dicts. So, for this we can use update method. So, what it does is it does in place updation or modification. So, let us have this example of this D2 object. So, in this D2 we have within the curly braces we have two elements with capital A as the key and the small a as the value, then capital B as the key, and the small b as the value. So, we have this D2 dict object. So, let us initialize this, let us run this. So, this is there. Now, we can add, what we can do is D1 object that we had created earlier, we can use the update method to merge this. So, we can call like this D1 dot update, and within the parenthesis we can pass the argument D2, the other dict object. And if I run this, if I again access the values of D1, you can see that apart from the original 3 elements that were part of D1, the S, I and F, we have 2 additional elements capital A and capital B. So, in this fashion we can merge 2 dicts. Now, further if I want to add another element. So, let us take another example. Here instead of merging 2 already created dicts, I am just updating the current dict with additional element. So, you can see D1 dot update, and within the parenthesis I am passing another in the form of just directly typing the another dict with just one element capital C and the value is small c. So, if I can pass this. So, let us run this, and now in the D1 if I run this, you can see that another element has been added at the end of this particular dict. Now, sometimes when we are creating dict, we might be required to pair up 2 sequences element wise to create a dict. So, for this is something how this can be done. So, let us focus on this. So, some of the previous methods that we have discussed before, we can use them here. So, a similar example we had done before as well. So, here we are first defining a dict, empty dict mapping 2 with just the curly braces, as you can see. So, the idea is that we have 2 sequences and how we can pair them element wise. So, we have let us say D1 dot keys, this is one sequence let us say, and we have D1 dot values, and this is another sequence, and how we can pair them up in a sense so that a dict is created. So, in a sense from one sequence we are going to take the keys part, and from the another sequence we are going to take the values part. So, in this for to generate this kind of thing, we are running a for loop here, and you can see we have k comma v and v in zip, and in the zip we are passing these 2 sequences D1 dot keys comma D1 dot values. In the mapping part, you can see in the mapping 2 and k. So, for k is to indicate the index of this particular dict here. So, mapping to k, and we are passing in the values here v. So, when this whole iteration for loop runs, then we will have created a mapping to will combining pairing of these 2 sequences. So, let us run this. So, you can see in the output you can see S is taken from the key sequence, and then the ohm, which is a value for this first element of this dict, this is coming from the second sequence, that is D1 dot values. Similarly, the next one I is coming from keys, and the value part is coming from the second sequence. Similarly, third F is coming from the first sequence, the value part is coming from the sequence second sequence. So, so on and so forth. So, in this fashion, given any 2 sequences, using them we can pair up element wise and create a dict. So, one sequence can feed the keys part, and the another sequence can feed the value part. We can also use dict function to create a dict. So, till now we have been mainly using the curly braces, but we have a dict function as well which can be used. So, dict can also be defined in through other words also. For example, a dict is essentially a collection of 2 tuples where combined elements are separated by colon instead of comma. So, dict can also be in a way understood using this representation, a collection of 2 tuples 2 tuples where the elements are separated by colon. So, let us understand this through an example. So, we are now this time we are creating a another dict called mapping 3, and we are using dict function this time, and you can see we are zipping these two sequences range 5 and reverse range 4 here, and you can see these two are actually tuples. So, in a sense we are combining, and let us run this. So, you can see the key part of this is coming from here. So, you can see 0 here, first key value pair, first element of this dict is 0 colon 3. Now, this can be considered as a tuple where you can see 0 and 3 are separated by colon instead of comma. So, in a sense this is a tuple, this is followed by another tuple which is 1 colon 2. So, 1 is key, 2 is value, and they are separated by colon. So, in tuple they would have been separated by comma. So, this could be another tuple. So, if you really look at it the dict, this is what we meant. So, they can be considered a collection of tuples where the elements are separated by colon instead of comma. So, 0 3 one tuple, then 1 2 another tuple, then 2 1 another tuple, and 3 0 another tuple. So, in that sense. Now, if we just whatever we had used, whatever we had passed on to this dict function, if we pass on the same thing to a list function, you can see here, and in the list function you can see in the output we have passed on first sequence zip range 5, and the another sequence is reverse range 4. You can see this is a list of tuples where 0 3 1 2. So, if you compare the mapping 3, the dict object that we have created earlier, and this one the list object that we have created just now, by using the same sequences, and you can see that in a sense they are like tuples, collection of tuples. Let us move on. Now, we will talk about some of the useful dict methods, for example get and pop. So, here let us start with the get. So, D1 is the one dict object that we have already created. So, if we run this D1 dot get, and we are using this key S. So, we will be able to access the value of it. So, D1 dot get S and ohm, and D1 dot get T, and this is so because we know that T is not part of this D1 object. So, if I run this, you can see that nothing is returned here, because that object that particular element is not part of this D1 object. Now, when we ran this particular line of code, we did not get anything in return, because it is the this none was returned. So, we can change this default return value. So, for this the same function get we can use. So, here in the next line of code what we are doing is D1 dot get, and in the parenthesis we are passing a second argument as well, where it says key not found. So, instead of the default returned value, that is none, we would be, if that particular element is not part of that object, we will be printing this message key not found. So, if I run this, you can see we will get if I run this here, you can see we get this key not found message. Now, if I run another method D1 dot pop, so here again we do not have any element with the key T in the D1 object. So, again I will get error. So, if I run D1 dot pop T, so we will get error, and so what we can do is again we can change this default return value. So, here you can say D1 dot pop T, and the second argument that I am passing on to the pop pop method, that is key not found. So, because T1 is not part of the object, now we will get this message as the printed output. So, if I run this, you can see key not found. Now, let us move on to the one important function, that is other method, that is set default. So, this particular function is quite useful to set values when we are generating a dict. So, if to demonstrate this, we will take this example where we are supposed to categorize a list of terms by their first letters as a dict of list. So, we might have a number of terms, and those terms would be essentially English words. So, some of those words will start with the same first letter. So, we would like to club them together. So, in this fashion we would like to create a dict of list in a sense, where all the elements which are sharing the same first letter, they let us consider that as a list. So, similarly we will have, given a set of terms, we will have a number of such list where all the elements start with the same letter. Now, that first letter can be treated as a key. So, if that is the kind of requirement that we have, so how we can use set default method to perform this. So, one thing is to perform this we can also follow the conditional logic. We can use if else statements to perform this very easily, and so but that would require writing a more number of lines of code, and probably slightly more computational time. So, instead what we can do is we can use this set default method to set this particular kind of key value combination while generating this dict. So, let us say we have terms like this alpha, beta, gamma, alpha 2, beta 2, beta 3. So, here you can see that alpha and alpha 2 they can be clubbed together. Then similarly beta and beta 2 and beta 3 they can be clubbed together, and then gamma separately. So, let us define a empty dict here D3 with the just the curly braces, and we can run this for loop here for x in terms. So, for every term we will run this loop, and we will D3 object, and we will call this method set default. So, what we can do in the argument side is that the x 0, which is actually the first going to be the first letter in that any particular term, that will take, and so that will take as the key part, and the second argument is going to be a list. So, in that so that set default function will put all the terms which are starting with this first letter into that list form, and keep on appending to that list as we iterate through all the elements of the terms. So, if I run this, this is what I get A and then the value part is a list with alpha alpha 2 to elements. Similarly, B, and then the value part is beta beta 2 beta 3. So, in this fashion, so this set default is quite useful when we are trying to generate a dict. So, similarly there are other ways to perform the same things. So, this is something that we will discuss in the next lecture. So, at this point we would like to stop. Thank you.